Howdy gamers, I'm the 112, this is the channel where I'm always right, and I want to talk about Mass Effect, partly because it's my girlfriend's favorite franchise, but mostly because I'd like to see how well it holds up today. Originally released in 2007 and re-released in 2021, Mass Effect spawned a critically acclaimed trilogy of games. Plus one. But I'm planning to give each of these games the attention they deserve in their own videos, so for now we'll just focus on the first one, which according to Wikipedia was praised for its world building, characters, narrative, and voice acting. While the latter's up for debate, the three former are by far some of the best I've seen. And even then, I think the voice acting is great, with the exception of Mark Meer as the male version of Commander Shepard. That's not to say he's bad in the role, he just sounds a bit stilted compared to Jennifer Hale as female Shepard, but I think anyone would sound a bit stilted after creating the voices for multiple alien races that you can encounter across the series. I love him as the Hanar, but when it comes to Shepard, I'd have to say I prefer Jennifer Hale's performance. And you know what? So does Mark Meer. There's some speculation around whether or not male Shepard was ever intended to exist, but the closest thing to concrete evidence I was able to find is this incredibly short Polygon article where they've got Jonathan Cooper confirming that the 3D model for Shepard was originally made in the image of a woman. Why am I even talking about this? Gender doesn't matter, so on this playthrough I'm going with female Shepard since Jennifer Hale is a goated voice actress and Garrus here is apparently my girlfriend's boyfriend. Maybe I can learn a thing or two from him. But before I get too far into this game's story and cast of characters, I'd like to talk about the game's mechanics so that we're all on the same page here. Now, the game's been described as a third-person shooter with RPG elements, and I think that's backwards. Yes, at its core, the gameplay revolves around you taking cover and using the abilities of whichever one of the 6 classes you chose to navigate combat encounters. However, in 2024, I don't think the combat is mechanically complex enough to warrant being the main focus. Sure, there's a plethora of abilities at your disposal that can change the tide of a fight at a moment's notice, but even on the highest difficulty, Insanity, any combat encounter can be cakewalked with a half-decent sniper rifle, barring one fight in particular, but we'll get to that. Right now, I want to talk about those abilities I just mentioned. Like I said, there are 6 classes to choose from, those being Soldier, Adept, Engineer, Infiltrator, Vanguard, and Sentinel. Each one of these has their own specialization, which might sound daunting at first, but really isn't once you understand what that means. Every character can wield each of the 4 weapon types: pistols, shotguns, assault rifles, and sniper rifles, but depending on which class you chose, you'll be more effective using certain types of weapons. For instance, infiltrators are incredibly effective snipers, while vanguards are better off using shotguns to get up close and personal with their enemies. And while I would love to dive into every single class specialization and how it changes the gameplay, I've only ever played Vanguard because in the later installments, its gameplay loop is too addictive for me to put down, despite the class feeling like it's missing something in the first game. Spoiler alert, it is, but that's for the next video. So I'll encourage you to pick these games up and try some of these classes out for yourself, because each one's unique. That doesn't necessarily mean all of them are good, but they'll at least give you different perspectives on how this game can be played, and I think that's something worth noting, because while the combat itself can feel shallow, the sheer amount of choice you're presented with makes up for that. And I'm not just talking about combat, choice is a major player in the entire series, most notably in the role-playing elements. With Mass Effect being the originator of BioWare's famous dialogue wheel, it presented a whole new way to write games. Rather than having 2 characters engage in pre-made dialogue via cutscene, they effectively turned those cutscenes into gameplay by giving you the option to select which bits of dialogue you think would be appropriate for the situations you find yourself in, even going as far as having the decisions you make have actual consequences, rather than using the dialogue options as different flavors to create the same dish. It makes a more immersive, lived-in world that can really help keep a player engaged in the story, since all of a sudden, it's not just the player character you need to worry about, but your companions as well. Learning about their struggles, motivations, you know, all that boring stuff that makes a character a character. But I can't really say more on that without getting into spoilers, so I guess this is where my general opinion ends. Long story short, if you haven't played the Mass Effect games before, you should. They're absolutely worth your time, regardless of what you may or may not have heard about the third game's ending. Plus, the Legendary Edition with the original trilogy routinely goes on sale. At the time of writing this, it's like $5 for 3 games, and if that doesn't sound like a deal to you, then take it up with your high school econ teacher. I'd rather get into this game's story and talk about what works, what doesn't, and, of course, inject my totally unbiased, factually correct opinions into it. I'll stop stalling now and get on with it. Mass Effect begins in the character creator like all good games do. This is where you create the Shepard that you will be spending the next 3 games with, so make sure to pay attention when choosing things like what your childhood was like or how fucked up your psychological profile is. These are kind of just here for flavor, as the only things they affect are minor dialogue changes and how many Paragon or Renegade points you start the game with. Paragon and Renegade, of course, correlate to how good or bad Shepard is perceived by those around them. Once you've finished making your Shepard look as good as the BioWare character creator will allow, you can actually start the game, which opens with a dope-ass establishing shot and the line, "Well, what about Shepard?" before transitioning to the shortest text crawl known to man so that they can hit you with the title drop right out of the gate. I hope you're not tired of hearing me say Shepard's name yet, because that's going to be a recurring thing here, and I'm just trying my best to emulate what it feels like to play these games. We get a cutscene of Shepard getting ready for whatever mission we're being sent on, and it's here we get to meet our first 2 crew members, Joker and Kaidan. Joker is our pilot, who we'll learn more about later, and Kaidan is a soldier who we will also learn more about later. But from what we heard them talk about, there's a Spectre on the ship named Nihilus, whose presence is a bit divisive, to say the least. And I should probably note that when I say Spectre, I'm referring to the Black Ops-esque unit within Mass Effect and not the supernatural entity. This can be seen when Shepard is summoned to have a meeting with Captain Anderson and Nihilus the Spectre. As to why Nihilus's presence is so divisive, well, he's an alien. Given humanity's track record with encountering things that look different, I'm sure you can guess what this is allegory for. That being said, I'm not at all surprised to see it here, and I respect BioWare for not jumping down your throat with the message, rather using this first dialogue to introduce you to their systems in a pretty intuitive way. You enter this conversation and right out the gate, you're presented with the dialogue wheel with a few options to select from. Options on the right are to progress the conversation forward, while options on the left show up when you're able to inquire further about something. This is where that fantastic world building I'd talked about comes in, because you're immediately able to start learning things about the universe you've found yourself in, and none of it feels out of place, because you're asking questions under the guise of being as informed as you'd like on what you're getting yourself into, at least when Anderson finally enters the scene. This starts off with Shepard getting formally interrogated by Nihilus, who also makes some vague remarks about this planet we're going to called Eden Prime. He implies that there's more to this mission than we know about when Anderson enters to actually brief us. We learn that something called a Prothean beacon was unearthed on Eden Prime and we need to recover it. Also, Nihilus will be evaluating us for a promotion to the Spectre status. Explains all those questions he was asking earlier. That was phase 1 of the interview. Good news, we passed. Bad news, phase 2 won't be a cakewalk. Joker interrupts the briefing with live footage from Eden Prime, showing it under attack by the synthetic species called the Geth. There's also this suspicious-ass ship in the sky that I feel like not enough people are concerned about. Don't worry though, they will be. We drop Nihilus off at a separate location, so I guess the interview's on hold, and then we hit the ground with squad mates Kaidan and Jenkins. Here we're introduced to mechanics such as looking around and walking. Not shooting though. That's reserved for further up the road when Jenkins, itching for combat, runs in guns blazing and fucking dies. I gotta ask, does this game seriously kick off with a Leroy Jenkins reference? Because that's fucking hilarious if it does. And it's entirely possible. This game was released in 2007. The Leroy Jenkins incident occurred in 2005, and this dude's name was something L. Jenkins. There's no way I'm not right about this, right? Anyway, we should hopefully be past the Geth drone sections now. I'd talk about them more, but all they teach is that you can tap a button to have your squad mates attack a target. Aside from that, they add nothing to the story, so let's just move on to when we encounter actual Geth androids holding a colonist down on some type of device that... Jesus Christ. After fighting them off, we meet Ashley, a soldier stationed here that knows the place. She fills the missing spot in our squad, but not the Jenkins-shaped hole in my heart. Ashley points us in the direction of a dig site where we fight more Geth, but find no beacons. We do hear from Nihilus, who informs us that he's inspecting something. Cryptic, but go off, I guess. We keep moving and come across a cutscene to introduce us to husks, or what happens when the Geth impale you on one of those spikes that we saw earlier. They're basically cyber zombies, and they go down just as easily as you'd expect them to. Exploring the area, we can find a locked door, which introduces us to the hacking minigame. It's fine? There's a timer in the center of a few rings with an arrow on the outermost ring. The objective is to get that arrow to the center while avoiding these rotating red blocks. It's not a very mechanically complex minigame. Even if you fail, you can just retry ad nauseum until you finally get it unlocked. And unlocking this door lets you meet these two doctors that you're able to ask questions to. Mainly about the one doctor who's on the verge of insanity, but inquiring informs us that he's got extra meds to take, so he'll be fine. After this, we ask Ashley to take us to the spaceport, where we immediately get another cutscene. Here, we see that Nihilus has found another Turian, this one named Saren. And if you're wondering who Saren is or why he's here, so does Nihilus. He's incredibly confused since Saren is also a Spectre and they don't typically send more than one on a mission. Saren simply reassures Nihilus that everything is fine, then shoots him in the back, which is when we show up, and after fighting off more Geth, we check on Nihilus's body. Bro is 100% dead, but there's no Saren in sight, meaning we, the player, know what happened, but our cast of characters here doesn't. Luckily, this guy Powell shows up to explain what happened via Powell Ex Machina. The cool part about this is that you're able to make the choice of whether or not Shepard believes this guy who just so happened to witness what went down between Nihilus and Saren after waking up from slacking off in the corner. And while we fight more Geth to reach the spaceport, I'd like to pose a question. How do y'all feel about the use of omniscient storytelling in these games? In simpler terms, how do you feel about knowing things as the player that your character doesn't? Because I think there's an argument for both. You could say that it would enhance the role-playing aspect if we only knew everything that Shepard knew when making decisions, or you could say it's already enhancing the experience by letting you choose to make the story play out in whichever way you want. I'll come back around to this at some point, since by now we've reached the spaceport where we find the Geth arming some bombs. This introduces us to timed gameplay. We have 5 minutes to disarm 5 bombs, and this would typically be a very tense situation if the sniper rifle didn't trivialize any encounter taking place outside of 5 feet in front of you. Once the bombs are disarmed, we can interact with the thing that we came here for, the Prothean beacon. Kaidan steps up to inspect it and starts tweaking out. Concerned for the well-being of her crew, Shepard shoves him out of the way and takes that Prothean prescription for herself, hallucinating 5 gum ads in the process. The probe explodes and Shepard is out for the count, meaning we get to see what that guy Saren is up to via cutscene. This one opens with titties. There's really not a better way to phrase that, believe me, I've tried, but it's who this pair's attached to that has more of my interest. The cutscene doesn't tell us what her name is, ignore the subtitles, but she's talking with Saren, who's throwing a bitch fit about humans touching his probe. Wow, they really weren't subtle with these innuendos, huh? The cutscene ends with Shepard waking back up on the Normandy, and I can't remember if it's confirmed that Shepard was able to see that conversation through some space magic bullshit, so I'm gonna pretend that they didn't until proven otherwise. After a quick checkup with Dr. Chakwas, Anderson enters to talk to Shepard in private about what went down on Eden Prime. First off, the council heard about what happened, meaning we've got to talk to them. Sick. Second, the goal is to get Saren's Spectre status revoked. We can use the council meeting to try and do that. Third, Ashley is now an official member of the crew. How you feel about that is up to you, but like it or not, she's here to stay. And after this conversation with Anderson, the game begins to open up, letting you explore the ship and speak with your companions at your leisure. I think this is worth doing after each main mission, since your teammates will all have their own opinions on how said mission went down. For instance, Kaidan thinks the Eden Prime mission went terribly on account of losing Jenkins and almost losing his smoking hot commander. If you'd like to learn more about Kaidan, you can, and here we learn that Kaidan is a biotic who enlisted to make his parents proud. I get the feeling there's some underlying trauma there, but we'll get to it later. Speaking with Dr. Chakwas again can give you some more information on the occupants of the ship. Kaidan using an outdated biotic module, to give an example. I'll be honest, I didn't really talk with the good doctor that much in this playthrough, so there won't be much of her in this video. Sorry about that. I just thought that the rest of the crew was so much more interesting, especially after talking to Ashley and learning that she's got some pretty bad imposter syndrome about being on the Normandy. Pressing on reveals that she feels like she wouldn't be here if Jenkins hadn't died, and while she's not wrong, you're able to reassure her that she earned her spot here like anyone else would. And that's all the companions you can really talk with, so let's ask Joker to take us to the Citadel for that meeting with the Council. We pull up to the Citadel, and I'm just gonna let this cutscene play out for a second. God damn, that's beautiful. As Joker lands the ship, you get these shots showing architecture that feels like Sid Mead's NASA concept art brought to life, painting the Citadel as this fantastical intergalactic melting pot where all sorts of aliens can come together and coexist. And then you meet Ambassador Udina. God, I fucking hate this guy, and you will too by the time this video's over. Udina's pissed at the Council for not helping out at all on Eden Prime and wants the ground crew of Shepard +2 to speak with them, which we'll do right after I explore the Citadel a bit. During these explorations, we get to meet some of the other alien races that won't be joining us on our travels, such as the Volus, who were instrumental in establishing a galaxy-wide economy. Finance bros wish they had this level of sauce. Despite being the backbone of an entire economic system, they don't have a seat on the Council. Obvious Star Wars reference aside, I can't understand why they wouldn't have council representation. They're a non-violent species, they're economically brilliant, and they love a good trade and barter system, which includes people. Okay, I think I get why they don't have a seat on the council now. So I'm just gonna slide on over here and talk to the L Corps. Straight up, these guys are the most hilarious form of autism representation I think I've ever seen. The L Corps speak in complete monotone, meaning their speech naturally includes tone indicators. They prefer the comfort of their homeworld, and they don't like sudden changes. I fucking love these guys. Let me find out their favorite food is noodles with cheese, and I'm on the next ship out of here. Talking with them further, you can learn that the L Corps got socially abducted into the Citadel via the Asari, a race we'll learn more about later. Because across the hall, you can meet Executor Pollen. He's a council member representing the Turian race, and while he doesn't have much to tell us about their culture, he does offer some insight as to how he himself views us. Basically, he doesn't like humans. He holds this oddly hypocritical belief that humans are the council's newest favorite pet, but also thinks that we need to fight for equal treatment. So which is it, dude? Are we not taken seriously enough by the council and need to fight for that? Or are we getting preferential treatment from them? But to answer that question, we've got to meet the council. On the way there, I took some time to explore the Citadel since there's just so much to it. So after taking time to appreciate the gorgeous architecture and this statue that gives Caden a headache for some reason, we experience some casual racism from Ashley.
I can't tell the aliens from the animals.
And continue upwards to the council. Quick side note about the elevators. Since this game was released in 2007 and therefore had long-ass loading times, they added in news updates or announcements that will either give you fun facts about the world or recap your journey as though the general public is reacting to what you've done. It's such a cool thing that got me sticking through the rides rather than simply skipping them. And at the top of this elevator ride, we get to meet Garrus. He's currently a CSEC officer investigating Saren, but when you ask him how that's going, he tells you he can't find shit since everything Saren touches ends up classified. That's rough, buddy, but we've got to meet up with Anderson and get this meeting going. Unfortunately, the meeting goes horribly. Saren joins us since this is basically his trial, but without any hard evidence, there's nothing we can do to revoke his Spectre status. Doesn't help that Saren's got an airtight defense that the council totally buys. Especially doesn't help that they think Shepard is kinda crazy if you dare mention the Reapers. Meeting adjourned, Udina and Anderson pull us aside for a private conversation. Udina proceeds to take Anderson off the case since he's too close to Saren, and if you're wondering what that's about, there was once a time when Anderson and Saren worked a mission together. Saren's tactics ended up killing a bunch of innocent people, giving Anderson a deep-seated hatred for the Spectre. We're also given given the advice of finding that guy Garrus, as well as talking with some Volus named Barla Vaughn. I figured I'd speak to Barla Vaughn first, since that was closer, but on the way there I got distracted by this guy messing with a keeper. I went to ask what the hell he was doing and learned that he's a scientist scanning the keepers to learn more about them. Sounds pretty reasonable considering the keepers were a package deal with the Citadel. They're responsible for general maintenance and keeping the whole place running, and that concludes everything we know about them. Since they're so integral to the Citadel's quality of life, it was made illegal to interact or interfere with the keepers in any manner, meaning that this guy is committing a crime by attempting to research them. So let's help him out with that. He is paying for the data after all, and who am I to say no to free money and potential lore? So I spent way too long running around scanning these things, and during that whole ordeal I came across a dispute between a CSEC officer and this stupid jellyfish. The problem here is that the jellyfish, called the Hanar, is preaching without having the required permit. If the Hanar simply purchased the required permit, they'd be able to carry on without issue. However, the Hanar believes that its right to religious freedom is being violated by being required to purchase a permit. So what can we do in this situation? Well, after speaking with both of them, I learned that it's not illegal to purchase a permit on behalf of someone else. Plus, the Hanar would accept the permit as a gift and thus wouldn't have its rights violated. Perfect solution all around, and the nice officer even gave me something for my troubles. It's 12 XP in a journal entry. Are you fucking kidding me? Is this where Bungie pulled 2 tokens and a blue from? Oh my god. So Barla Vaughn has information on Saren, and I'd very much like to know it. The problem there is that Barla Vaughn technically works as a financial advisor for the wealthiest people on the Citadel, and deals the information under the table, so to speak. If you ask him about that, he'll assure you that everything he does is perfectly legal, and if you're adamant that he's still shady, he'll basically tell you to stay broke. All this to say, I was incredibly surprised when he just gave up the information on Saren for free. Apparently, some really important guy called the Shadow Broker, fire name by the way, is pissed at Saren for a bad deal. So pissed that he hired what's known as a Krogan mercenary to deal with him. And if you want to know the difference between a mercenary and a Krogan mercenary, you'd better make your way down to CSEC Academy. That's also where we can find Garrus, and I'm never gonna pass up a 2 birds 1 stone opportunity. We head over to CSEC and find Rex, the Krogan mercenary, receiving a stern talking to from a couple of officers. Though I don't think there's much these guys could do if Rex decided to stop complying. I mean, look at him, dude's massive. After talking to the absolute unit, we learned that we share a common goal of hunting down Saren. But if we want this guy's help, we need to help him track down a different guy he was hired to kill named Fist. Fist is the owner of a bar and stiffed the Shadow Broker on some information from a Quarian and thus needs to die. As for what this Quarian knows, it might be of use to us, so Rex tells us that the Quarian is ours once this Fist guy is gone. Oh yeah, we also get a lead on where Garrus might be. I'll get to that as soon as I'm done helping Rex, who we can now add to the squad via the squad selection mechanic. Whenever you go on a mission, you're able to select 2 companions to assist you on your objective. Not only does this give you even more player agency, but it also incentivizes you to ask questions about your missions before going on them so that you're able to choose the best company for the adventure. Whether that be for combat or for story moments is up to personal preference, but given how competent each companion is, I prefer to bring the ones that I feel would best fit with the story. So with Rex and Caden by my side, since Ashley doesn't like aliens, I was off to Korra's Den to find Fist. Along the way, I met a few new people. One was Jalid, who's apparently being harassed by his business partner who just so happens to be Chobun, the scientist who asked us to scan the keepers. I'll keep that in mind. The next person I met was Emily Wong, an investigative journalist who asks us to inform her of anything we find that relates to some investigation she's doing. Sounds odd, but I'll play her games. We also meet Conrad Werner, a Shepard superfan. That's literally all we know about him. And just before reaching Korra's Den, we find Chobin again, so I decided to talk to him about Jalid. According to Chobin, Jalid was working with him to scan the keepers and was supposed to be the one to disseminate the findings. Instead, Jalid kept the info for himself, presumably to sell. You're given the option to threaten Chobin with an arrest before confronting Jalid, but if you do that, then you won't be able to scan the keepers anymore, and I still like free money, so I'm just gonna let that slide and confront Jalid at a later date. And now we're at Cora's den to find Fist. But surprise, the place is set up for an ambush. So we fight our way through and make it to the warehouse section of the bar where we find a couple of workers. This can turn violent, but if you tell them to leave, they will. How nice. Probably helps that Fist is a terrible boss. Speaking of, we're now in Fist's office. A fight breaks out and he whips out turrets like a bitch. But once you take those out, Fist goes down just as easy as any other human would when confronted with bullets. Once he's down, you can talk to him and learn that the Quarian is off to meet with the Shadow Broker, except it won't be the Shadow Broker, it'll be hired assassins that work for Fist. We get the location of the meeting, a 4-minute timer, and a dead Fist now that he's exhausted his usefulness. Thanks, Rex. Timer ticking down, we race to the alley where the meeting is being held. After a quick firefight, we rescue the Quarian named Tali and bring her to Udina's office. There, she begins to tell Udina everything she knows about Saren as well as the Geth. If you're curious about what the Geth's deal is, they were created by the Quarians and are essentially an AI that has a collective conscience spread across the entire Geth population. Kinda like the Vex from Destiny, just without the time travel. And since Tali knows the Geth, she was able to salvage the memory banks of one, which lets us listen to an audio log of Saren talking about what went down on Eden Prime, as well as mentioning something called the Conduit. Udina tells us that this information needs to go to the council, and we're also presented with the choice to recruit Tali to the team. But why wouldn't you? She's great. I love her. So with Tali and Caden in tow, we make our way back to the council and present them with this new information. Definitive proof that Saren is working with the Geth. And while the council still doesn't believe in the Reapers, don't worry, they will. As a result of this new evidence, Saren's Spectre status is officially revoked and Shepard gets promoted to Spectre so that we can continue investigating Saren unimpeded. And after all this, I realized I forgot to pick up my homeboy Garrus. So I ran back to CSEC, remedied that situation, and headed back to the Normandy, which is now ours. Turns out Anderson decided to step down and figured the best captain for his ship would be us. He tells us to chase down Saren and not to worry about any sort of political fallout. That's what Udina's here to take care of. And if you'd like, you can ask him for more details on his history with Saren. Doing so will reveal that the mission went wrong when Saren decided to blow up a refinery, killing over 500 civilians, and pinned the whole thing on Anderson. This effectively killed Anderson's chances of ever becoming a Spectre, and he's hated Saren ever since. Can't really say I blame the guy. With the Normandy now in our possession, we can board it and give a speech to the crew if you're feeling it. The cool part here is that you can customize it a bit with various dialogue options in order to deliver it in a way that aligns with your Shepard's personality. And once you wrap up your speech, the game wraps up its tutorial. Yes, everything that just happened was essentially one giant tutorial. Isn't that great? You don't even really notice with how much freedom it gives you, but you're able to interact with all of the game's systems at an introductory level via the Citadel. The only thing you didn't have access to was the star system map, which lets you choose where you and the crew go. But now every decision is in the palm of your hands. Where you go, what you do, who you bring, everything is yours to decide. Which is why I decided to go to the wrong star system out of my own generosity, since that's the best way to break down how space exploration works. You're welcome. You're able to choose which star systems to travel to, and each one contains a set of planets with the occasional asteroid belt or shipwreck thrown in. You can select each planet to read more info about it, with some being scannable for in-game collectibles. There's typically one planet you're able to land on, such as this one that's broadcasting a distress signal. I figured I'd check that out, got bodied by this thing called a Thresher Maw, and immediately fucking bailed to go do main quest activities, meaning we are now on Therum to find an Asari named Liara. Since we're dealing with Prothean technology, it makes sense that we'd want to pick up an expert on the species. However, landing on Therum means you're introduced to the drivable vehicle. This thing just fucking sucks, dude. This is what I imagine driving a Cybertruck feels like. This thing does not obey the laws of physics, for those are merely gentle whispers idealistically preached from soft lips left to fall upon the cold, uncaring carapace of the M35 Mako. It's programmed like a cat in the sense that anytime you go airborne or crash, it tries its best to land with the wheels on the ground. This sounds great in theory until you actually try driving the thing and realize that it's incredibly floaty, meaning that this auto-correction system is constantly fighting against you to keep the wheels on the fucking ground. The only upside here is that flipping the Mako onto its back is an insanely impressive feat. That's not necessarily true. The turret it comes equipped with packs a pretty solid punch at the cost of overheating. Granted, it takes a decent amount of time to actually overheat, but I digress. The problem with the turret is that it's the focal point for the camera controls, which makes sense. What doesn't make sense is why the direction of the car is affected by the direction that the camera's pointing. Let's say there's an enemy off to the left of the Mako that you'd like to shoot at while continuing along your current path. To do this, you need to turn the camera to the left while telling the car to begin driving to the right instead of driving forward, since your current path is now technically on the right side of the screen rather than in front of you. It feels incredibly unintuitive, but credit where it's due, when you get the hang of maneuvering this thing in a fight, it's not half bad. So long as that fight takes place on flat ground. I guess this is all just to say that I hate how much control we're given over the Mako when it's driving, but the second any part of it goes airborne, the whole thing gives up completely. Sorry for the rant, but I figured that was the most entertaining way to use all this Mako footage I unfortunately need to sit through. But the good news is we're out of the Mako, and fighting new Geth types on foot, like the Colossus, which is massive, or the Stalkers, which are on crack. And now that we're done with the Geth, we can go inside the ruins that Liara's meant to be researching, and after fighting through even more Geth, we find her trapped in a Prothean barrier that she activated in order to keep herself safe. Makes sense, but she can't deactivate it from inside the barrier, and the controls are behind her, on the other side of the barrier. You're seeing what the problem is here, right? Luckily, there's a mining laser right behind us with a shockingly forcible passcode that we can use to access the room behind Liara. Unluckily, using that mining laser means we need to fight off more Geth as a prerequisite. After drilling into the room and freeing Liara, we're found by a Krogan battlemaster that was sent here, with more Geth. There's gonna be a lot of those guys, I'm just getting you used to it. This is basically a boss fight, and I'll be honest, it kinda sucks. Purely because the Krogan can one-shot you with a melee, and this arena is very small. But if you just focus on the Geth before your allies go down, then the Krogan goes down incredibly easily. The power of teamwork or something like that. No time to speculate though, the magma levels on this planet are rising and these ruins are about to be swallowed. So the squad plus Liara books it back to the exit where Joker swoops in for pickup 10 seconds before the place is filled with hot lava. Now that we're back on the ship and not in imminent danger, we can finally talk with Liara about her research. And if you need her credentials, she's 106 years old with the majority of those spent researching the Protheans. As for what the Protheans are, they're an ancient alien race that just up and vanished one day. But their technology was responsible for things like the Citadel and the Mass Effect relays, meaning they were way more advanced than any other species that exists today. So when Liara voices that she's confident the Protheans weren't the first civilization to suddenly vanish, I'm inclined to help her prove it. We also learn why the Geth attacked Eden Prime in the first place. Turns out a working Prothean beacon is incredibly rare to find, and the Geth have the ability to make sense of the data inside them. Since the Protheans were so advanced, the beacons work by transmitting straight brain power into another being that interacts with it, but that only works on a Prothean to Prothean connection. There's no cross-platform capabilities here. That's why the vision Shepard saw was so unclear, because our DNA wasn't right. And with her capabilities demonstrated, Liara joins the team, meaning we're now able to talk to her and learn more about the Asari. Right after we talk to the Council about how that mission went. And contrary to what you might think, the Council is surprisingly impressed with how we handled it, with the exception of Palin the Turian, but I don't think anything makes that guy happy. So after you fill the Council in however you see fit, we hang up and go talk to the crewmates. Starting with Liara, who thanks us for saving her, while also voicing concerns about the crew not trusting her due to the fact that she's the daughter of Matriarch Benezia. And if you're wondering who that is, she's the Asari with the massive rack that we were all too busy staring at to notice her name in the subtitles. You know, the one conspiring with Saren. But Liara doesn't know why her mom is working with Saren, as that's incredibly unlike her. I'll put a pin in that for later. Right now, I'd like to learn more about the Asari. What we are able to learn is that the Asari are a monogendered species where every member of the race is biologically female. If you've got questions about how they reproduce, don't worry, the game thought about that because it's the first thing Liara tells you that doesn't relate to her mother. Since all of the Asari are female presenting, they have the capability to assume a male form to reproduce. However, it should be noted that this isn't the preferred method of reproduction. The Asari are a culture with values that center heavily on diversity, so when an Asari decides to have children, they'll typically seek out a male from a different species in order to add their contributions to their biology. As a matter of fact, using the term pureblood to refer to a child born from two Asari is considered an insult. That's how much they value diversity. Not that hard, is it, Rowling? And that seems to be all Liara has to say to us for now, so let's see what Caden's up to. Now, an important thing to note with Caden is that he's so fucking horny. What I mean by that is it's incredibly easy to initiate a romance with him if you're not careful when selecting dialogue options. The good news is there's nothing to get him excited when he's upset about how the council is handling this whole operation. And while I agree, that's incredibly obvious, so let's learn more about Caden instead. He'll give you the rundown on how biotic powers originate from humans being exposed to something called Element Zero, and Caden here thinks he may have been exposed intentionally rather than accidentally like most are. And once you've got biotic powers as a child, you get sent to Brain Camp for short, or Biotic Acclimation and Temperance Training for long. I'm sticking with the short option. Caden's experience at Brain Camp was spent on a research platform called Jump Zero, where he was stationed with other kids learning to control their newfound powers. Specifically, this one girl named Kara from Turkey. It's implied that Caden had a crush on her and fuck, I think I just initiated his romance. No worries though, we can just talk to Rex and listen to some of his stories to get that sour note out of our mouths. Rex proceeds to dump an insane amount of information about something called the genophage because he does not like other species. And for good reason, because the genophage is insanely fucked up. It's a genetic mutation within the Krogan that causes childbirth to be extremely difficult. I'm talking only 1 in 1,000 children even survive childbirth levels of difficult. But why is that the problem of other species? Well, that's because the genophage was created by other species. Specifically, the Solarians, as a team of their scientists, developed the mutation at the request of the Turian military. Granted, the genophage was simply meant to reduce the number of viable births by a drastic amount, but the Krogans themselves are a species prone to violence, meaning that by the time we meet Rex, the Krogan species is in danger of extinction due to a lack of viable births combined with constant killing. Worst part is, they can't cure it because not a single Krogan is a scientist. I just wanted to hear some battle stories, but I guess that'll have to wait till we've built up a better relationship with Rex. So let's see what Garrus has to say. He is gonna be my boyfriend after all. Turns out he really enjoys working as a Spectre and actually hated how many rules he had to follow at CSEC. If you press on that, you can learn that he'd been planning to quit anyway since he found himself feeling burdened by all the red tape he'd accumulated over the ranks. So he chose to join up with us in order to see how justice could be served outside of the CSEC system, which is simultaneously cool and creepy. Cool in the sense that Garrus really cares about justice, but creepy in the sense that we're not sure what lengths this guy might be willing to go to achieve justice. But it seems that devotion to justice runs in the family, as Garrus joined CSEC because of his father, who's apparently taking the resignation pretty hard. But Garrus believes that the only way to take down Saren is to send someone with the same status after him, and I fully agree there. So, parting on mutual ground, I headed to the engine bay to talk with Tali. Oh my god, does she have a lot to say. For starters, she's absolutely fascinated by the tech on the Normandy. Who can blame her? It's cutting edge, it's supposed to be impressive. But the stuff Tali has to say mainly pertains to the Quarian culture, which is probably the most interesting one in my opinion. The entire species lives on something called a flotilla, which is essentially an amalgamation of ships rubber banded together that are constantly being maintained and repaired by the Quarians on board. So then why is Tali here rather than aboard her flotilla? Well, the flotilla, called the Migrant Fleet, can't produce everything, so Quarian children are sent out on a pilgrimage during their coming of age in order to gather resources and materials, because the main purpose of a pilgrimage is to find something of value that can be brought back to the ships. When a Quarian returns with a gift, they bring it back to the migrant fleet and offer it to the captain of whichever ship within the flotilla they wish to join. And while Tali could just bring back a couple of gears and a few sheets of metal to call it a day, giving a subpar gift is typically frowned upon within the community. And since I can't think of a better segue, the Quarian community operates in such a strange way. For starters, they're a nomadic bunch, which is obvious if you think about the words migrant fleet, meaning they all rely on each other for survival. But due to this nomadic lifestyle not providing them with an abundance of resources, all Quarian couples are limited to one child in order to better manage said resources. I'm sure they would find it more cruel if it wasn't absolutely imperative to the survival of their species. Guess it's a good thing the Quarians have a system in place for making tough choices like that. Sure, it's a pretty fucked up Frankenstein version of democracy and martial law, but it somehow works. They have the Conclave, which is a group of democratically elected officials meant to represent the various ships aboard the migrant fleet. The Conclave is responsible for creating the laws that the people obey, but then the military got involved. On the migrant fleet, the top 5 members of the military serve on something called an Admiralty Board, which ranks a step above the Conclave. The Admiralty Board has the power to come together and overrule a decision that the Conclave has made, kinda like a Megazord of bureaucracy. Which would be pretty fucked up if the members of the Admiralty Board weren't required to resign as soon as they overrule a decision. Granted, Tali doesn't seem to know what happens if the board members simply choose to not resign after overruling a Conclave decision. Sure hope we never have to find out. And it's at this point that I realized I haven't told you why the Quarians live aboard the migrant fleet. Surely they didn't just appear floating in space grabbing various bits of stardust to build shit, right? Of course they didn't, that'd be insane. They used to have a home planet called Renok, where they prided themselves over their technological achievements, specifically a version of virtual intelligence, aka VI, that they named the Geth. Don't look so surprised. Tali told us her people made these things back on the Citadel. But how did this happen? One thing you should know about the world of Mass Effect is that there are galaxy-wide laws in place against creating an AI program, which is what the Geth are. But you might have noticed that when I was talking about the Quarian homeworld, I called them a VI. Both of these labels are true, just at different points in time. See, the Geth started out as a VI system meant to carry out menial tasks such as household chores. But the Quarians wanted them to do just a little bit more, so they'd inject subtle changes into the code to improve the Geth's capabilities over time. The problem, though, is that the constant modification created an inherently unstable matrix where the thoughts the Geth had could ping between the various models, meaning that the more Geth units were made, the smarter they got. It eventually hit a point where the Geth began to gain sentience and weren't very happy with how they were being treated. It's a lot like that Rick and Morty joke with the butter robot, except instead of having an existential crisis over it, the Geth went to war about it and exiled the Quarians off their own planet. I suppose you could liken it more to the Australian Emu War, but the difference is that this is an actual tragedy while the Emu War is a fucking comedy. Seriously, 2,500 shots fired and like 300 emus killed? That's a 12% accuracy rating. I get you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, but holy shit, dude. This is all just to say that while the Quarians are responsible for creating the Geth, they did attempt to stop the problem before it escalated to what it is now. How morally sound you think their attempts to genocide a species they created are is up to interpretation, but I'm sure you can tell what my stance is based on the wording. And with that moral quandary out of the way, we can head on over to Ashley for a nice relaxing discussion about how she doesn't believe the aliens should have full access to the ship because they're aliens. Why are you like this? You'd think we'd be past this shit in 2183, but here we are, I guess. As we talk to her and learn more about how she grew up in a military family and has never been off planet, her reason for distrusting aliens becomes more apparent. She just hasn't been around them ever. So all she had to go on was the word of her family members that had met them, and spoiler alert, they don't really have the best things to say about them. There's a lot of history between Ashley's family and the Turians relating back to what's known as the First Contact War, but at this point we haven't gotten to know the girl well enough to ask about that. So we essentially ask her to keep an open mind about our non-human crewmates and leave it at that. Naturally, the next thing I decided to do was go kick that Thresher Maw's ass to vent my frustrations like any good commander would, would. So I'm just going to talk about the side quests while that footage rolls, because there's a lot of side quests, dude. Holy shit. Normally, I'd love to take the time to talk about all of these and poke fun at the bad ones, since that's quick and easy to do, but so many of these side quests are actually good. Yeah, there's obviously going to be side quests that could have been done without, but even the missions that are subpar from a gameplay standpoint are supplemented with actual story and world building. Did I need to fight this Thresher Maw on the way to a repurposed military outpost? No, it was entirely optional. I just did it because it gives you a shitload of XP and credits whenever you kill one. But that means if I hadn't fought the Thresher Maw, my gameplay loop for this side quest would have been landing on the planet, driving the Mako in a straight line, talking to people, and getting back on the ship. So why would anyone play them? And it's because of the stories built around them. That gameplay loop I just described, the storyline around it was that a military member named Kyle defected and became a cult leader after witnessing too many deaths under his command and snapping. Look me dead in the eyes and tell me you don't want to know what the hell's going down at this place. 'Cause I did, and that shit was sick. Plus, these side quests serve as a way to really shape your shepherd into their own character by having them react to these insane situations you find yourself in. They're all well worth doing, even if just to see what sort of a story BioWare crafted for this particular adventure. I don't even know why I'm trying to convince you. If you have made it this far into the video, odds are you're coming off your 9th Mass Effect relapse and figured you'd hear what the funny clock had to say. Thanks for that, by the way. Might as well like and subscribe too if you're enjoying this. Comments are cool. I'll stop stalling on the Novaria mission now, because it might actually be the best mission in the game. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion, it probably is, but hear me out because this level design is unfucking real. We're tasked with tracking down Benezia, and since that's Liara's mom, she'd like to try and talk her mother down to get to the bottom of this with us. So we attempt to land on this giant ice cube where we're immediately greeted with their anti-air defenses as our arrival was unscheduled. That hostility extends to their security team not believing that we're a Spectre, and once we've got that sorted out, we meet Anile, an asshole Solarian that can tell us a little bit about Saren and his investments in Binary Helix, a weapons company that's totally not making weapons for him. But most notably, he can tell us that Benezia is indeed here at a research facility called Peak 15. I would have preferred Peak 112, but that's neither here nor there. What is here is us, because there's a blizzard on the snow planet, and Anile won't give us a pass to the garage, meaning our only options are waiting or leaving. That's frustrating, but on our way out, his secretary gives us a secret third option that involves a Turian in the bar, meaning we now have a scenario where a Spectre, an archaeologist, and a racist walk into a bar. Stop me if you've heard this one before. So we make our way to the bar where we meet Lorik Keen, who needs help with an investigation and in exchange can give us a garage pass. Turns out that asshole Anile got pretty wealthy ever since he took over control of the rent here, and Lorik needs us to retrieve evidence of this off his computer in his office, which is currently closed for inspection. By inspection, I mean Anile has hired thugs under the table to find and dispose of this evidence. And while we can't kill security, we can kill mercenaries. So after heading into his office, clearing out the place, and snagging that data, we can head back to Lorik. But as we exit the garage, we're confronted by Gianna about the noise. I guess gunfire will do that. Good news is, she's also working on exposing Anile and just wants us to get Lorik to testify. But he's promising me a garage pass, so unless she can— oh shit, she's also got a garage pass. Yeah, I'll talk to the guy. Back at the bar, we managed to convince Lorik to testify after telling him he'd be considered a hero and that the board of directors will be pissed at Anile. Job done, we get the garage pass from Gianna, watch Anile get arrested, and head to the garage for the impending Geth ambush that I totally never saw coming. And I know it feels like I'm really fast-tracking this whole section, but you've got to understand, this is still the preamble to the actual mission. It feels incredibly boring and borderline depressing to play through, especially when you get outside of the station to drive the Mako to Peak 15. There's wreckage and bodies along the trail, as well as Geth stationed throughout the route to ensure nobody makes it to Peak 15 alive. And while they've been effective so far, I'm different. And upon arriving at Peak 15, we have to fight even more Geth and Krogan to enter. While it's nothing new, entering the facility immediately sets the atmosphere for what we're getting ourselves into. Once you walk in, there's dead Asari commandos on the floor, the place is in a general sense of disarray, and then your radar lights up like a 4th of July block party when these giant fucking bugs start crawling out of the floor grates to ambush you. So what the hell happened here? Well, we can find out once we repair the facility's systems. This is done by either solving a puzzle or using 100 Omnigel to bypass said puzzle. I chose the former because in all 12 plus trilogy playthroughs my girlfriend has done, she has never once done this puzzle. So I'm gonna explain how it works so that she can see it's not hard, just tedious. Plus, I'm too autistic to pass up a chance for a puzzle breakdown, so humor me here. You're presented with 3 columns of 4 rows in pyramid-style shapes, meaning that the top row is the shortest while the bottom row is the longest. Your goal is to move these pieces from the leftmost column to either of the others. However, when you begin to move the rows, you'll notice that you can't select a row below the topmost one, and you can't stack the larger rows under the shorter ones, meaning you have to deconstruct the pyramid in the left column from the top down and figure out how to rebuild it from the bottom up in either the middle or right column. It's a bit confusing, sure, but here's what I mean. You move the first row to the rightmost column, go back to take the second row, but you can't put it into the right column, so it goes in the middle. Now, you can't go back to that left column to move the third row because you're unable to slot it into the middle or right column. So you take the first row out of the right column and put it in the middle on top of the second row, meaning you can go back to the left column and move the third row to the right column. I'm sure you get the picture now. And after speaking with the VI system named Mira, we get the info on Benezia's whereabouts. Good news, she's still in the facility and is reachable by train. Bad news, train's down because the power core and landline connections are still down until someone fixes them. Hope y'all went to trade school because we electricians now. Shit, I would have gone to trade school if you'd told me electrician work amounted to blasting through more Geth and more bugs, pressing a few buttons and getting on with my day. But the electrician work isn't done yet. Now we gotta see how the train's running. It's just through this decontamination chamber, which is crawling with giant bugs. No matter, this side room has a control panel that can purge the chamber like so. Man, whoever did that wiring ought to get fired. Get it? Because the guy... Whatever, let's just get on the train. And after a quick ride to the rest of the facility, we hop off the train where we're immediately greeted with more hostility as we enter a room of soldiers hunkered down behind makeshift cover. One of them being Captain Ventralis, who can fill us in on the whole bug situation. Turns out they came from a sector of the facility called the Hot Labs, meaning they were made here. They'd called in Benezia to come in and handle the situation, but she hasn't been heard from in a while, so we should go check on her and also put a stop to this. Walking around this makeshift base, you get a sense of just how dire the situation is for the rest of the staff. There's scientists that are sick from exposure to something called Thorin B, which is a non-contagious bioweapon. Not sure how that works, but you do get the option to make a cure in the base's quarantine zone, so let's go do that and see what else we can learn about this place. You're able to talk with this Asari, who gets pretty annoyed that we're interrupting their meditation. Plus, they're new here, so they don't really know too much about the place. Fair enough, I'll go find someone that does. Like this Volus scientist who can actually give us some reliable information on the giant bugs we've been fighting. They're called the Rachni, a species of alien that was thought to be extinct until some eggs were found on a derelict ship. Scientists being scientists, they brought the eggs back here and essentially brought the species back to life a la Jurassic Park. The way this guy talks about them gives me major Oppenheimer vibes, and I was half expecting them to drop some line like, "I am become Geth, bugger of galaxies," and the fact that they didn't proves that I should never be allowed to write video game dialogue. Once we're done talking to him, we can step into the quarantine room to whip up a cure for those scientists, which just involves a minigame of pressing a button before a progress meter passes a predetermined threshold. Super easy, barely an inconvenience. Except when we go to leave, we're immediately inconvenienced by that Asari woman from earlier who tries to jump us. Guess the meditation didn't work too well. But once she's dead, we can bring the cure back to the scientists and ask about that Asari. Turns out she was placed in Peak 15 after Saren pulled some strings to fast-track her hiring process, which sounds fishy because it is. And after wrapping up conversation with this doctor, we get ourselves a maintenance access pass, which gives us another route to get into the secure labs where Benezia is supposed to be. Thank God she's where she's supposed to be, because I would have lost my mind if we had to go to a third location. We get a dialogue session with Benezia that amounts to her talking shit and initiating a fight, except she doesn't actually fight. She locks herself down in a Destiny 2 Titan Super and calls in some Geth and Asari to do the fighting for her. But after 3 waves of enemies, Benezia's shield drops and our conversation can continue. She starts glazing Saren, even dropping the line, "My mind is filled with his light," which is such a creative way to say she's just been gargling that dude's cyber sack this whole time. I jest, of course, because after this, something seems to snap in Benezia, and she begins acting like a whole different person. She tells us that she's been indoctrinated by Saren and that she hid a piece of her mind away that she could call upon at a later moment when she could help destroy him. This is that moment, in case you were wondering. She goes on about that whole indoctrination thing, giving us the knowledge that Saren has an insane aura that causes you to not be yourself around him. Turns out that aura is connected to Saren's new flagship named Sovereign. Remember that for later. Sadly, this is all she knows about that whole indoctrination thing, but she does know stuff about the Rachni, so let's learn about them and figure out why Saren's taken an interest. His interest lies in their species' collective knowledge of a hidden Mass Effect relay out in deep space. And if you're wondering why the Rachni of all things are the only ones who know where this is, that's because they're incredibly territorial and were driven to close down all methods of access to their system. Plus, their species passes on memories from queen to queen, and that's what Benezia's got here in the hot labs. Saren wants to extract the Queen's memories to learn the location of this relay, as he believes it will lead him to the conduit he's searching for, so Benezia slips us a copy of those coordinates to send us after Saren. And then her moment of clarity slips, so I hope Liara's cool with matricide. Hey, she said she's proud of Liara though, and that's more than most kids will ever get. And after brutally disrespecting Benezia, she gets one last moment of clarity where she tells Liara that she's always loved her before she just gives up and dies, since she'd never be herself again if she were to live. Holy shit, dude, that's traumatizing. But we've got bigger problems to worry about in the name of a Rachni queen trapped in a tiny glass tube. But as we approach, something rises behind us. It's the corpse of a dead Asari that just starts talking to us? As a vessel for the Rachni Queen, they can do that? Yeah, they can just do that, and it makes for a really interesting conversation with the Queen, as she requests that you kill her offspring as they have no songs of their own. No idea what that means, but it's important to the Rachni's culture, and who am I to turn that down? The whole reason, if you're curious, is because the scientists here took the eggs she'd laid from her in an attempt to raise their own controlled Rachni. Obviously, this has failed. And because the offspring were taken from the Queen, she wasn't able to teach them the songs of the Rachni which they used to communicate, hence the no songs of their own thing. Since she no longer considers them children, that's why she's asking us to eliminate them. Then she asks what we intend to do with her, and we're given 2 options. Either activate the acid tanks in the chamber and kill her, or simply let her go. But why would we want to kill her? She sounds pretty chill so far. Yeah, there's a bit of backstory that I need to explain. See, the reason the Rachni were thought to be extinct is due to the Krogan wiping out the species in what's referred to as the Rachni Wars. A period in Mass Effect history that saw the Rachni entering intergalactic warfare after they reverse-engineered FTL travel using Solarians that stumbled into the wrong galaxy. What the fuck, dude? The Rachni made contact with another species once and said this simply won't do, so they figured out how to travel faster than light simply to wage intergalactic war to make sure this never happened again. That's hardcore as hell, I can't even lie. But obviously they lost, as evidenced by us being here. So with all this context, the correct option is to kill the Queen, right? And I'm sure that would be so if it weren't a bit too nuanced for that. See, the Rachni Queen before us was merely an egg during the time of the Rachni War, laid in a last-ditch attempt to preserve the species from extinction. Now she has the chance to rebuild her people, and this time keep to themselves rather than waging pointless wars. A heartwarming promise that the Queen gives to us, and a sentiment that Liara agrees with, Ashley thinks we should kill it dead on account of it being an alien, but that's just Ashley for you. I chose to let the queen live, not just because it was the right thing to do or to score brownie points with Liara, but for a secret third option that'll come up in about 2 videos. For now, we need to honor the queen's request and finish killing her offspring. So, off to the hot labs where they're being hatched from, where a scientist named Yaroslav fills us in on the whole Rachni situation I'd just explained like 2 minutes ago. In hindsight, I should have come here first, but oh well. Yaroslav's got a plan to get rid of the Rachni that he calls a neutron purge, which is a sick-ass name, but he needs Mira in order to initiate it. We head to the back and boot her up, but my dumbass forgot to grab the code from Yaroslav, so I couldn't initiate the neutron purge. I even tried faking the passcode, but no dice. So I ran back to Yaroslav and asked him for the code to activate the purge. But as he's handing the passphrase to me, a Rachni bursts from the vents and stabs him in the back. Wild. This definitely would have felt more terrifying if I hadn't spoken to their queen first, but that's the problem with open-ended games like this, isn't it? You can craft a story as beautifully as you'd like, but there will always be players that fuck up your pacing. I've played D&D before, I know how this goes. I just figured I'd go off on a little tangent there because after activating the neutron purge, you're given a time limit to kill a massive swarm of Rachni and get out before you're caught in the labs. Good thing snipers exist, huh? And now that we've turned the hot labs into the hotter labs, we can board the Normandy to debrief and plan our next move. So long as it's not the Mew relay. We aren't ready for that yet, regardless of what Ashley thinks. Naturally, the council wants to talk about what went down on Novaria, which roughly translates to Pollen getting pissed at us for letting the Rachni queen live. But this dude would also ask if you enjoy committing genocide if you end up killing the queen, so he can cry me a river. After that mess of a council call, it's time to catch up with the crew again to see what else we can learn about them now that they've had some time to get used to the ship. Except for Tali, she's been having trouble acclimating to how quiet the Normandy is compared to the constant noise of the migrant fleet. It's pretty obvious that she's homesick and still wishes to return once we've stopped Saren, but she's also gained a new appreciation for her people while she's been here. Plus, the engineering team loves her and they've been doing their best to make her feel welcomed, so at least she's doing well. Not sure if we can say the same for Liara. Despite losing her mom, she seems to be handling it well, telling us that she'd become an archaeologist due to a fascination with other species and civilizations, but Benezia wasn't a fan of that choice for some reason, probably due to her expecting Liara to follow in her footsteps and become a political leader for the Asari, putting an insane amount of pressure on her own daughter that just ended up pushing Liara away into a career that aligned more with her own interests, rather than what her mother wanted, but what do I know? She also finds Shepard fascinating, but how could you not? It's literally Shepard. I'm sure my guy Garrus would agree with you on that too, but he's too busy telling me stories from his days at CSEC. Most notably, a story about Dr. Salion, a Solarian geneticist that used to work on the Citadel, who Garrus came to know of during an investigation to find out why there was a surplus of internal organs being found on the black market. So you can imagine Garrus's surprise when he ran a test on one of those found organs and found that the person it belonged to was very much not dead. Turns out the guy used to work for Salion, so Garrus investigated the lab and found no Solarian hearts, no Turian livers, not one Krogan testicle. So he started bringing in employees of Salion, and during questioning, one of them just began bleeding out of fucking nowhere. Because what Salion was doing amounted to using his employees to grow cloned organs inside of them that he would later harvest and pay the employees hush money for. Sounds like a fair deal, except if the organ doesn't grow perfectly, the good doctor would simply leave the extra organ inside the employee it was cloned from, regardless of any adverse effects that could have on their health. When CSEC went to arrest the guy, they found the lab torched and Salion escaping the Citadel. Garrus ordered the anti-air systems to shoot him down, but got overridden as the ship was still too close to the Citadel to shoot down without causing too much collateral damage. So what does this have to do with us? Well, Garrus figured out what ship Salion bought and has its transponder codes, meaning we can find it if we so choose. I'm definitely going to talk about that when I get to it in my playthrough recap, but I want to circle back to what Garrus said in regards to Salion's lab when he investigated it, because Garrus was talking about how he'd found not one Krogan testicle, and now I'm looking at 4 of them. Hi, Rex. And despite what you're probably thinking, this is not a joke about how Rex looks like 4 testicles that gain sentience. It's a reference to the fact that Krogan actually have 4 testicles. I've got no idea how that works, and BioWare is full of cowards that refuse to show us, so asking Rex just made sense. Unfortunately, no dice on the whole testicle thing, but we do get to learn that Rex and Saren had met before. Why didn't you lead with that, man? Well, Rex had just been working a job, had no idea who Saren was, but got a bad feeling about the guy from the one interaction they had. Good instincts, I can't lie. Wish Caden had some, because then we wouldn't have gotten this awkward-ass scene where he's talking about his friends at brain camp, specifically that Turkish girl he had a crush on. And I should note that this scene isn't awkward because Caden's opening up about his personal life. It's awkward because this is how he tries to initiate a relationship with Shepard. What the fuck, dude? I'm autistic and even I can read a situation better than that. Oh my god. Granted, you're given 2 different options to end this relationship. Sure, one's later and a lot more dramatic than just telling him no, but I do appreciate having options. So after letting him down gently, I decided to go talk to Ashley about how much men suck. Unfortunately, she's still in disagreement about the decision to release the Rachni Queen, but I've already heard it from the council, so whatever. But regardless of her opinion on our decisions, the most interesting thing to come from this conversation is the info we get about her family. We learn that she's got the stereotypical military family with lots of siblings, all sisters, much to the dismay of her father as he felt outnumbered. But her dad's still proud as hell of her and her sisters, congratulating Ashley when she made chief. I know it sounds like the stereotypical parent thing to do, but you gotta understand that her dad was routinely shafted on promotions in the military simply due to that aforementioned history Ashley's family has with the First Contact War. So any success this family saw was celebrated regardless of gender. There are more details about her sisters, and if you're interested in hearing those, you get to learn that her whole family is kinda badass. But one of her sisters also thinks Caden's cute, so maybe take that with a grain of salt. Oh yeah, Ashley also believes in God. I realize that this kinda comes out of nowhere despite being an incredibly interesting concept to explore in sci-fi, and that's because this series does fucking nothing to have characters have meaningful conversations about religion. Ashley brings it up in conversation, asks what you believe, and after giving your answer, that's it. This literally never gets brought up again, which sucks, because having a character that still believes in a higher being while also dealing with forces attempting to become those higher beings is just begging to be explored, and I'm sad as hell that it isn't. But that's all the crewmates talked to, meaning it's time to plot our next mission. And upon reaching the star chart, we get a top priority mission from the Citadel that requires us to go to a planet called Vermeer to check out some spy intel that the Council received. But before we do that, we've got to get just a bit more info on the Geth, which we can visit the planet Pharos to accomplish. Turns out the Sol colony on Pharos has been reporting Geth sightings, and considering the planet is made up entirely of Prothean ruins, it makes sense to go check it out. However, landing on the planet is surprisingly easy compared to Noveria. Maybe too easy, as literally nobody contacts the Normandy during our descent to the colony of Zoo's Hope. So to fill that void, I'm going to tell you about Joker, since he's the only other crewmate that's around for all 3 games. Plus, he's our pilot, and getting to know the guy flying me from star system to star system just seems like the cool thing to do. And I'm right, of course, because Joker's character is unironically so fucking cool. He's got Vrolik syndrome, meaning his bones are brittle, especially in his legs, and he's the best pilot in the galaxy. Is that title self-appointed? Yeah, but it's also earned. He enlisted with the Navy as soon as he could, and by the time he graduated, he was the best pilot among his class and his instructors. But where'd the name Joker come from? Well, that's from one of his instructors who gave it to him on account of Joker never smiling since he was too focused on being goated at flying ships. He's a really interesting character. I should talk to him more. Anyway, we're on Pharos now. Stepping off the ship allows us to meet David, a colonist who tells us that the colony leader, Phi Don, wants to talk to us about helping fight off the Geth. This conversation abruptly ends when we're ambushed by Geth. And they killed David. R.I.P. David, you were a real one for all 30 seconds I knew you. True Jenkins type. So after fighting our way through the Geth to reach Zoo's Hope, we find Phi-Don and talk to him, which lets us learn a few things about the colony. Here's the list. A. The colony is funded by Exogeny. 2. The Geth have taken over the Exogeny facility as their base of operation. D. The colony is short on food, water, and power, which we can offer to help with. And 4. The colonists here don't want to leave, they just want the Geth gone. The source of their Geth problem seems to be a transmitter set up in the tunnels underneath the skyscraper we're on, which is coincidentally where we can fix their food, water, and power issues. Sounds productive as fuck, let's do it. Now, as soon as you reach the tunnels, you're fighting Geth. No shocker there, we knew they'd be here. But the amount of territory they're controlling down here is seriously impressive. So I started pushing their shit back, reactivating the water pumps as I hunted down their signal transmitter. But in the process of restoring the water, I found this guy, Ian Newsom, a strange individual that's definitely got something going on in his head, but he won't say, or can't say. The way that he's talking, it sounds like something's stopping him from telling us what ails him. The most we can get is him telling us to ask Phi-Don about something. Cryptic shit in my sci-fi game? Unbelievable. Guess we'll follow up on it later, though. Right now, this Geth transmitter needs our attention. Normally, this would be just another smash and dash type mission where we kill Geth, blow up the transmitter, and get on with our day. But this transmitter happens to be under the guard of not 1, not 2, but 3 Krogan. Oh my fucking god, how annoying. Once that's dealt with, we can enter another room where we're ambushed by these things called Varen. They're basically alien dogs and incredibly hostile. Coincidentally, they're the solution to the food problem if we manage to take out the alpha of the pack. It's a cramped fight, but that's what shotguns are for, and after wiping out the Varen alpha, we can grab the power cells for the colony in the same room. How convenient. I made my way back to the colony, collected my rewards for helping out, then asked Phi-Don about Ian. Here I was told that there's nothing we can do to help Ian, and Phi-Don was incredibly cryptic about what the hell was even wrong with the guy. Strange, but there's Geth holed up in the Exogeny facility that we need to get rid of. And the best way to reach that facility is via the Prothean Skyway, which we can traverse with the Mako. Whoa. For real though, this is probably the best Mako sequence in the game, and it's not just because the whole section gives me huge Halo 2 vibes. That being said, the only reason it's the best section is because it's a straight line with a decent amount of enemies, and certain sections that allow you to get out and explore a little. One of these areas, though, houses a secret second colony that we were unaware of, only finding it after picking up radio chatter in the Mako. Turns out it's a colony full of Exogeny employees, and the first 2 people we meet are Ethan and Juliana. They're arguing about the dangers of going back for Juliana's daughter, who remained at the facility after the Geth invaded to try and save some data. She asks if we'd be willing to look for her, so I agree. After talking with them a bit more, we find out that despite this colony being primarily Exogeny employees, not a single one of them has any idea what sort of information the Geth could possibly be looking for. Sounds suspicious, doesn't it? That's because it is. Here's why. We arrive at Exogeny and immediately find Lisbeth, Juliana's daughter. She catches us up on what happened, telling us she'd stayed behind to back up data when the Geth ship connected to the building and locked her in. Naturally, we ask her what data she deemed so important to save, and this is where we learn about Subject 37, aka the Thorian. It's a plant-based life form that has the ability to control living organisms so long as that organism inhales its spores. Also, it lives in the substructure of Zoo's Hope. Lovely. But at least we know what's wrong with Ian, right? Now, let's get the Geth out of Exogeny. Unfortunately, we're on our own for this since the Geth ship blocks all communication along with the exits. So, during the gameplay loop of enter room, kill Geth, you're incentivized to explore and figure out what to do since there's nobody in your ear to guide you. This was incredibly refreshing to me, honestly. I've been getting kinda tired of these big AAA studios making their games extremely handholdy to retain the attention of dudes who got bored of their yearly title release for 2 weeks, so it was great being able to interact with things on my own terms, not just because I was told to by an NPC, even if that exploration inevitably leads me to math. As you explore the facility, you'll find server nodes along with Geth anchors that are keeping the ship attached to the building. Accessing the server nodes gives you some information regarding a company named Cerberus, which will become important at a later date, while interacting with the anchors reveals that they can't be destroyed by any of the weapons we have on our person. But you can find this little maintenance note that talks about the shuttle bay doors needing a very specific amount of pressure to operate, otherwise they're capable of shearing through anything. Anything, you say? I'm sure you can see where this is going, because after doing some quick math, yes, actual math, you can overload the doors to get those Geth off this damn building. It's actually such a cool cutscene watching the ship slowly peel from the skyscraper before plummeting into the fog below. Just beautiful. And if you listen closely, you won't hear the ship hit the ground because Joker's back on the comms with news that the zoo's Hope colonists are going nuts, pounding on the doors of the Normandy, trying to get in. Probably has something to do with that Thorian I mentioned earlier, and running into Lisbeth on the way out only confirms that. Turns out she knew way more than she let on about the thing and actually wants to help undo the damage, starting with telling Shepard that the Thorian entrance is blocked by shipping containers back at the colony. She'd also like a ride back to that Exogeny colony where her mom's at, so a quick road trip later and they've got a family reunion. Except Ethan's fucking lost it, going on about how Exogeny wants the colony purged, meaning it's up to us to try and defuse it. Luckily, if you've collected enough morality points through your dialogue options, you're able to talk him down. Unluckily for him, I did not have enough morality points, so... Now that that's taken care of, let's save a colony. Juliana can tell us a bit more about the Thorian, like how the colonists affected by the spores will do anything to protect it. Obviously, we don't want to kill colonists, so she gives us a grenade module that incapacitates human targets in a non-lethal manner. All we gotta do is throw them at the colonists, make them sleep, and deal with the Thorian while they all have a power nap. Except I suck at throwing grenades, meaning not every colonist made it out alive. Terribly sorry about that, but in my defense, they should have grouped up more. With the colony incapacitated, we can operate some machinery to unlock the Thorian's lair. Upon doing so, Phi-Don will hobble out rambling about how we couldn't possibly imagine the pain of having this thing inside your head before removing the problem area. Thanks for the trauma, dude. I'm gonna go whack this weed. So we head down the stairs and finally meet the giant plant, the Thorian. Why does it have teeth? I understand that carnivorous plants exist, but it gets to a point, man. Anyway, the Thorian spawns an Asari clone in order to speak with us, which is both gross and cool. The Asari tells us that Saren was in fact here, seeking information on the Protheans. He got that info, then sent the Geth in. As a result, the Thorian now hates all organic life forms, which means we get to clean up Saren's mess. Again. I sympathize with Anderson on a personal level now. And seeing as there's literally no way to avoid this fight, let's get started. There are nodes of growth around the arena that you need to destroy, but they're guarded by creepers. Aw, man. The fight sees you touring the skyscraper's various floors, blasting through waves of enemies until you can pop the node. But if you're able to pop these nodes from a distance, then all the enemies that spawn will just drop dead. Kinda gives you a bit of agency to approach the fight with if taking a high-risk playstyle is more your thing. Overall, it's not a difficult fight, but I wasn't really expecting one since Pharos is generally the easiest planet to get through. Once all the nodes have been popped and the Thorian is no more, we get to meet Shiala, an Asari who was trapped by the Thorian and has some knowledge to impart upon us. Specifically relating to the Protheans, since the Thorian has been around since Pharos was built, and this Asari has been able to absorb some of that info as a result of their brief symbiosis, hive mind. I don't know what to call it, but the important part here is that the knowledge she has can help us clear up the vision that Shepard's been having. I'm always one for more answers, so we let the Asari tap our brain and get a dope-ass cutscene that gives us more insight into what Saren's working with. Granted, it's still cryptic as hell, but that's part of the mystery, isn't it? So let's get back on the Normandy and see if we can't unravel some of that, shall we? Should be easy with Liara's help, is what I would say if the visions wouldn't have destroyed a lesser mind, sending her to take a nap and leaving us with the same questions we had before. But there's no time to ponder those, the Council's calling, and this time they're congratulating us. That's a pretty nice change of pace from their usual, and they're upset that we didn't capture the Thorian. Gonna be real, I don't think that would have gone the way they wanted it to. So after hanging up, it's time for another round of crewmate discussion. Yay. I went to check on Liara first, since she'd taken that whole joining minds thing pretty hard, and ended up getting some insight on how the other races view humanity. Surprise, surprise, they see us as big fucking bullies that steamroll anyone or anything that gets in the way of what we want, and it's now our responsibility to change their minds. Cool. Oh, and Liara also wants to bang Shepard, but I shut that down. Gotta save myself for marriage. On the topic of virgins, Kaidan thinks that the Pharaoh's mission went well. He even offers a possible contact that might be able to send shipments to the colony. Awesome. This is also where Kaidan trauma dumps about his Turian instructor at Brain Camp physically abusing them. He kinda just sat there and took it until it all came to a boiling point when the instructor hurt the girl he had a crush on. Kaidan, ever the White Knight, stepped in to stand up for her and proceeded to get the ever-loving shit kicked out of him, and then the instructor pulled out a knife. And that's when Kaidan snapped, lashing out in a fit of biotic rage, killing his instructor. Albeit accidentally, but still, he killed that guy. He obviously regrets it, but what else do you expect to happen when you pull a knife on a kid with space magic? I'm sure Rex can tell us, being a mercenary and all, but no, instead we get some of his backstory. He talks about why he left his home planet, which boils down to a falling out with a Krogan warlord named Jared, who also happens to be Rex's dad. Their fallout centers around Rex wanting to focus on rebuilding the rapidly crumbling Krogan population, while his dad just wants to keep contributing to that death toll like population zero is a goal, not an omen. They arranged a meeting on neutral ground to try and put their differences aside, but it was actually a trap set by Jared. Go figure. So Rex stabbed his own dad in the chest to barely escape with his own life. Whether or not Jared actually died is up for speculation, but I'm going to believe he's dead until proven otherwise. Kinda like how the Council's hellbent on declaring Saren innocent until proven guilty. Can't necessarily fault them there, that's just how a justice system is supposed to work. Though Garrus is pretty convinced that the Council is protecting the bastard and that we should kill Saren on sight. And while I'd agree under certain circumstances, these are not certain circumstances. So I told Garrus that I'd be willing to kill Saren as a last resort, since there's a chance he might have useful information. Best case scenario, we talk Saren into surrendering, but given the Turians' approach to warfare, I don't think that's happening, because talking to Ashley finally gives us a glimpse into the history of the First Contact War, specifically relating to her grandfather. During this conflict, Ashley's grandfather earned himself the title of the first human to surrender during the First Contact War, but you can't really blame the guy. The Turians were out here leveling entire city blocks just to wipe out a single fire team. But being the first man to show any sign of weakness kinda put a plague on his family name. That's why Ashley was stuck groundside. That's why it was such a big deal when she got promoted. It's all just systemic bias brought on by a choice her grandfather made. Now, Ashley's determination to be the best makes sense. She wants to prove that she can do better than those who came before her. It's a pretty noble ideal that I'm curious to see BioWare develop in the rest of the trilogy. And that's almost the entire roster. You might have noticed I haven't mentioned Tali, but that's just because all she wants after the Pharaoh's mission is a copy of the Geth data we got so she can bring it back to the migrant fleet. I don't see any way that can go wrong, so why not? Now it's time for the Vermeer mission, where so much happens. The mission starts with the Mako section. That's how you know shit gets real. They don't even warm you up with foreplay, they just dive straight into the rough stuff out the gate. This is by far the longest Mako section too, since we're dropped off outside the range of the enemy's anti-air defenses, which sees us driving for quite a while, occasionally stopping to lower some gates and eventually disabling those AA guns for Joker to land. Once that's done, we can meet up with the Solarian task force we'd been sent to reinforce. The Solarian Captain Kirahi, however, is a bit disappointed by the number of reinforcements, which is fair. I'd also be upset if my struggling task force was promised additional troops to help us hold it down, and then 3 fucking people showed up. But we're the best he's got, so let's get down to business. Kirahi informs us that Saren is on Vermeer to breed an army of Krogan. Turns out Saren found a cure for the genophage, which involves cloning them to circumvent the whole being born is literally a genetic lottery thing that the Krogan have going on. This causes a bit of a spat between Rex and Kirrahe, with Rex wanting to take this cure for the Krogan and Kirrahe wanting to reduce this facility to rubble. Rex storms off, obviously unhappy, and it's our job to calm him down, which is a difficult task since Rex really wants that cure. Even after telling him that he won't be around to see the benefits of this cure if Saren gets his way, Rex is still insistent that the risk is worthwhile. But who wouldn't think that saving their entire species isn't worth whatever risk that may entail? So if you want Rex to calm down, you have to help him out with some connections. Most notably, pointing out what the Council did to the Krogans after getting their help during the Rachni War, and then asking him if he really thinks Saren, of all people, would be any different. That does the trick, and with Rex willing to help out, we can talk to Kirrahe again to get this party started. By party, of course, I mean enacting Kirahe's plan to nuke the facility. That's not hyperbole either. This motherfucker has an actual nuke. We just need to disable the AA guns within the facility so that we can deliver this payload. Kirrahe has a plan to create a diversion at the front of the base, allowing Shepard and squad to sneak through the back and clap some cheeks. He wants to use a three-pronged attack at the front of the base and asks for one of our soldiers to help with that. You're given the choice to send either Ashley or Kaidan with Kirrahe, and I chose to send Ashley since Kaidan's better with tech and I'll need him to arm that nuke. Kirrahe makes it abundantly clear that there's a solid chance none of these squads will survive this attack, delivering one of the most motivationally bleak speeches I've ever heard. Matter of fact, I'm just gonna let that play out. Listen to this.
You all know the mission and what is at stake. I have come to trust each of you with my life, but I have also heard murmurs of discontent. I share your concerns. We are trained for espionage. We would be legends, but the records are sealed. Glorying in battle is not our way. Think of our heroes. A silent step who defeated a nation with a single shot. Or the ever-alert who kept armies at bay with hidden facts. These giants do not seem to give us solace here, but they are not all that we are. Before the network, there was the fleet. Before diplomacy, there were soldiers. Our influence stopped the Rachni, but before that, we held the line. Our influence stopped the Krogan, but before that, we held the line. Our influence will stop Saren. In the battle today, we will hold the line. Good luck, Commander. I hope we will meet again.
This speech is only 14 sentences long. It has a word count of 149, and it is so effective. 6 sentences in, we know exactly how Kirrahe and company feel. They're scared. They don't want to lay down their lives in a battle they'll never see the proper recognition for, but they're going to. So Kirrahe uses those next 8 sentences to rally his troops, boosting their morale by giving recognition to the achievements of their branch and the impact that's had in the past, telling them that this time is no different. Regardless of the outcome, their efforts will make a difference. You can feel it in his voice that these words aren't just lofty ambitions. He means every single syllable, and you believe him when he tells you that these efforts won't be in vain. In every sense of the word, Kirrahe is a fucking commander, just like Shepard. And that's why I think this scene works so damn well. This is the first time Shepard really gets to see a Spectre in action that isn't trying to kill them. The first time Shepard gets to see what a real commander looks like, and that's so important for their character development. It's not immediately obvious, but if you pay attention in the later games, you can see glimpses of Kirrahe come through when Shepard's delivering speeches, and I fucking love that. Wish I could say the same about the combat sections when you infiltrate the facility, but that's just not true. Are the fights boring? No, far from it actually. The arenas and enemy density feel fun enough to keep me engaged. I just hate how many Krogans you have to fight, because those bastards can still one-shot you with a melee, and I'm playing Vanguard. Honestly, the coolest part of this section is that once you're dropped in, you get linked up on a comms channel with Ashley and Kirihi, where Ashley will call out various things along your path that you can destroy to assist the Solarian task force on their frontline assault. It adds a nice level of immersion that I really appreciated, especially since whether or not you destroy these things makes an actual difference. I just wish there weren't so many Krogans when you were completing these tasks, you know? But once you've completed as many optional objectives as your heart desires, you need to enter the base. And if you brought Garrus with you, like I did, he taps into their security systems and gives you the option to sound an alarm on the far side of the base, thinning the amount of troops we'd have to face once we're inside. But if you sound that alarm, it'll put even more pressure on Kirihi's forces, and they've already got enough on their plate. Anyway, I started blasting, and after making my way through their soldiers, I was left alone with their Solarian test subjects who have some very interesting interactions. You can find a lone Solarian in a cell who begs to be released, claiming that his squad mates have already been indoctrinated, but he's perfectly fine. I felt more inclined to believe him simply due to the fact he was alone, and you can find all those indoctrinated Solarians in another cell. So I let the lone survivor flee, then had to decide what to do with the indoctrinated Solarians. If it somehow wasn't obvious, your only choices are to leave them be or kill them. And since we learned from Benezia that there's no coming back from indoctrination, God, that's a brutal cutscene. But who's even responsible for this? Saren's been hopping systems to further his own agenda. Benezia's dead, so what's up here on Vermeer? Well, if you take an elevator up to the 3rd floor, you'll find a Krogan doctor, bit of an oxymoron, I know, experimenting on husks. I don't think I even want to know what sort of experiments a Krogan doctor could come up with, so I won't, and we'll move along to the real meat of this mission, Saren's office. Upon entering, you meet an Asari who turns out to be Saren's PA, and something about that is so fucking funny to me. Just the image of this badass, intergalactic threat asking some Asari, hey, do I have any meetings scheduled today? Cracks me up. But she does give us access to his lab, even tells us that Saren's afraid that Reaper's Sovereign might already be controlling him. So what's going on in Saren's lab? Well, not much. Seriously, the lab is just a lone room with an intact Prothean beacon that you're able to interact with, in case you had ever wanted to know what the unbridled wrath of a 5-gum marketing campaign looks like. And this is where Shepard meets Sovereign. You thought Kirihi's speech was cool? Get a load of Sovereign's monologue, dude.
You are not Saren.
What is that? Some kind of VI interface?
Rudimentary creatures of blood and flesh. You touch my mind, fumbling in ignorance, incapable of understanding.
I don't think this is a VI.
There is a realm of existence so far beyond your own, you cannot even imagine it. I am beyond your comprehension. I am Sovereign.
Sovereign isn't just some Reaper ship Saren found. It's an actual Reaper.
Reaper, a label created by the Protheans to give voice to their destruction. In the end, what they chose to call us is irrelevant. We simply are.
The Protheans vanished 50,000 years ago. You couldn't have been there. It's impossible.
Organic life is nothing but a genetic mutation. An accident. Your lives are measured in years and decades. You wither and die. We are eternal, the pinnacle of evolution and existence. Before us, you are nothing. Your extinction is inevitable. We are the end of everything.
There is an entire galaxy of races united and ready to face you.
Confidence born of ignorance. The cycle cannot be broken.
Cycle? What cycle?
The pattern has repeated itself more times than you can fathom. Organic civilizations rise, evolve, advance, and at the apex of their glory, they are extinguished. The Protheans were not the first. They did not create the Citadel. They did not forge the mass relays. They merely found them. The legacy of my kind.
Why would you construct the mass relays, then leave them for someone else to find?
Your civilization is based on the technology of the mass relays. Our technology By using it, your society develops along the paths we desire. We impose order on the chaos of organic evolution. You exist because we allow it, and you will end because we demand it.
They're harvesting us. They're here to wipe us out.
What do you want from us? Slaves? Resources?
My kind transcends your very understanding. We are each a nation, independent, free of all weakness. You cannot even grasp the nature of our existence.
Where did you come from? Who built you?
We have no beginning. We have no end. We are infinite. Millions of years after your civilization has been eradicated and forgotten, we will endure.
Where are the rest of the Reapers? Are you the last of your kind?
We are legion. The time of our return is coming. Our numbers will darken the sky of every world. You cannot escape your doom.
You're not even alive. Not really. You're just a machine, and machines can be broken.
Your words are as empty as your future. I am the vanguard of your destruction. This exchange is over.
Yeah, this is just a cool-ass villain. It's also the start of my favorite BioWare trend where they give their big villains the coolest lines ever. Don't even try to tell me that you exist because we allow it, you will end because we demand it, isn't an incredibly effective piece of dialogue. From those two sentences alone, you know that the Reapers see themselves as mechanized gods, dictating when entire civilizations end as if it were as simple as booking your next haircut. There are just some bits of writing so beautifully crafted that a mere summarization wouldn't even begin to do them justice. The fact that Mass Effect contains two of those within the same fucking mission is nothing short of incredible, and stands testament to the kind of story BioWare was capable of crafting. God, I wish they could still do that, but why worry about the future when we've got a nuke to plant? After fighting through Morgeth to reach the designated nuke site, the Normandy lands thanks to Ashley disabling the AA guns and provides us with our payload. Ashley radios in about her squad being pinned down, so we head off to rescue her since Kaidan needs time to arm the bomb. But as we leave, the Geth send in reinforcements, pinning Kaidan down with the nuke. You are now presented with a very crucial choice. Do you continue on and save Ashley, or do you turn back to keep Kaidan safe? You cannot do both, and the game makes it very clear that whichever companion you choose to rescue, the other will die. It's such a brutal tone shift from the major decisions you've made up to this point. Those had all been decisions you made based on recent information. This decision is asking you to choose between two people you've, hopefully, been building a relationship with over the course of the game. It's essentially asking a parent which of the two children is their favorite. How could they possibly give you an answer? Except this time there is an answer, and her name is Ashley. Sorry, Kaidan, I played the trilogy with you once, and I just can't put myself through that again. At least this time it'll be a novel experience. So, we haul ass to the AA towers to help out Ashley and Kirrahe, but upon arrival, guess who shows up? Cause if you guessed Saren, then congrats. Your prize is this conversation we have with him prior to the inevitable boss fight. Saren hands us the generous offer of joining his crusade, and while you're given the option to try and talk sense into him, he's clearly too far gone to listen to a word Shepard has to say. But the real kicker is, Saren doesn't believe he's indoctrinated, which, if you remember the conversation with his PA, is a stark contrast to his former fear that he was already indoctrinated and didn't know it. He believes that he's a modern-day messiah, bridging an alliance between synthetic and organic life forms, which leads into a nice explanation as to why the Geth seem so cooperative. Turns out the Geth see the Reapers as the pinnacle of their own evolution, and if you're wondering how the Reapers feel about that, they're pretty insulted by the comparison. As if the Geth, a contraption made by stinky organic meat bags, could ever hold a candle to the synthetically supreme world-eating machines. It's a really solid conversation that highlights just how hard the Reapers are pulling the strings here. Like, if we weren't seeing all of this firsthand, then I don't think I'd believe Reapers existed either, which means we should fight our way out of here so that there's at least one person in the galaxy who knows what's up. This marks the beginning of Saren's boss fight, and it's fine, I guess. It's about as complex as you could ask from a third-person cover shooter made in 2006, meaning you do the exact same thing you've been doing all game, take cover and shoot things. Saren himself doesn't have the most health, so the fight is supplemented with Geth soldiers, which I'm sure would have been a challenge had I not spent so much time doing side quests to buy the best weapons in the game. So after steamrolling Saren to half health, the fight ends in a cutscene where Saren grabs Shepard and threatens to throw them over the edge before Shepard punches the bastard in the face and regains their footing. Saren leaves, I'm assuming in humiliation, and we get the hell out of Vermeer since there's a nuke going off in like 30 seconds or something. We are now back aboard the Normandy, one crew member lighter. Naturally, Ashley's attempting to grapple with our decision to save her rather than Kaidan, but BioWare doesn't give me the option to tell her it's because she has character development and he doesn't. So instead, I opted to ask her if she's trying to make a martyr out of herself to make up for her grandfather's failures. Holy shit. I'm constantly amazed at how brutal you're able to make these conversations. Now that Ashley's gotten the shit kicked out of her both physically and verbally, Liara offers to help us out with piecing together the rest of that vision now that we've found an intact beacon. Yeah, sure, why not? Now that we've got the whole picture, Liara is able to recognize landmarks within the vision that belonged to a planet called Ilos, so that's what I got Ilum mixed up with in my Fallen Order video. Anyway, the only way to reach Ilos is through that Mu relay I mentioned earlier. Problem is, the Mu relay doesn't allow any Alliance ships or Spectres to pass through. Maybe we can get the Council to do something about that, and speaking of, guess who's calling? We pick up the Council's call to debrief them on everything we found on Vermeer, and despite all this, they still refuse to believe that the Reapers exist. Whatever, the Council can pound sand for all I care. How are the homies feeling about the Vermeer mission? Oh man. Everyone has something to say about the decision to leave Kaidan to die, which is fair, especially from Ashley. She still thinks it's her fault that Kaidan died, but you can reassure her that the blame lies entirely on Shepard. We're the ones that made the call, after all. And if you continue talking, she'll even ask Shepard how they dealt with losing their whole squad on Akuz. And that fucking rules, because having payoff for a seemingly minor decision made in the character creation menu is just good attention to detail. Especially since the game doesn't take this opportunity to ham-fist some grandstanding position into the dialogue, they still let you choose how to respond to a question about something you weren't even there for, letting you play the role of Shepard. You know, like a role-playing game? I don't think it'd be possible for me to overstate just how realistic it feels to simply converse with characters here. Take Rex, for example. You walk up to him and he immediately tells you that he respects your decision to leave Kaidan behind. Who the fuck starts a conversation like that? I just walked over. It does a great job at making these conversations feel grounded rather than scripted, leaning into how blunt and awkward all of this would most likely sound. But it seems like this is just the time where we've got to have some hard conversations, because the rest of the dialogue with Rex consists of us thanking him for giving up the genophage cure and promising to make Saren pay for what he's done. Talking to Tali and Garrus gives a feeling of finality, as they both thank you for letting them join up, meaning that the only other crew member with something to say about Saren is Liara. She actually feels sorry for Saren, if you can believe it, but it's really not that hard to feel some sort of sympathy for the guy. Could you imagine being trapped within your own mind, held prisoner as you're stripped of free will while being powerless to stop it? Oh my god, is this dementia allegory? Now that's probably just me reaching, though indoctrination does sound like an actual nightmare when you describe it that way. Which reminds me, Liara asks Shepard how they're doing, which reveals that Shepard is indeed having nightmares. I think you would too if the fate of a fucking galaxy was on your hands. Speaking of said galaxy, Joker's got a call from the Citadel telling us that they're building a fleet to stop Saren, assembling a team, so to speak. Obviously, we want to be at the head of that fleet, so back to the Citadel. Unfortunately, getting to the head of that fleet requires a meeting with the Council, and you know how well I get along with those guys. To the surprise of absolutely nobody, the Council doesn't think that we need a Spectre in this fleet, which leaves us with the assignment of chasing Saren down on Ilos. Except the Council doesn't want us to do that either, since we dropped a fucking nuke on Vermeer, and honestly that's pretty fair. But they assure us that the patrols stationed around the Mu relay will be sufficient. They fully believe they've got the situation on Ilos under control. Spoiler alert, the Ilos situation is crazy, so we're gonna head on over and stop it. Is is what I would be saying if Udina didn't backstab us like a little bitch. He fucking grounded us. Normandy couldn't take off even if it wanted to, but we are allowed to brood inside of it, which is exactly what we're doing when Joker relays a message from Anderson to meet with him in the Club Flux. Not like we've got anything else to do, so off we go. We reach Anderson where the club is bumping, the drinks are flowing, and some Solarian is asking us to help him cheat at gambling. This is a side quest, obviously, but if you're interested in playing sci-fi blackjack, then it's pretty cool since you're guaranteed to win with his help. But we're not here to kickstart a gambling addiction, we're here to talk with Anderson. He tells us that no matter what, we've got to go after Saren. Nice to see we've got someone taking us seriously here, but that does raise the question of how we're going to get the Normandy out of lockdown. But Anderson's got that covered, telling us he can either sneak into the security terminal and lift the lockdown, or he can break into Udina's office and lift it through his personal terminal. I told him to break into Udina's office since it's personal. We're then treated to a cutscene of Anderson breaking into Udina's office, punching him in the face, and then lifting the lockdown so that we can go find Saren. It's such a cathartic scene for me since Udina's been nothing but a pain in my ass the whole game, and really hammers home the message that sometimes you need to go against the system in order for things to actually happen. Sorry if that lukewarm statement is too political for some of you, but you're just not gonna get an interesting story otherwise. Seriously, I'll ask you to name me one good story where the coolest moment comes from the main character doing exactly what they're told, because if that story exists, I'd love to read it. You can't even make the argument that the council made the right call in telling Shepard to stay put because of what Saren's doing on Ilos, which we've now arrived at after sneaking through the Mu relay with the Normandy's top-tier stealth system. After locating Saren on the planet's surface, we move in to deploy the Mako. Slight problem though, we need at least 100 meters of open terrain in order to drop. We have 20. However, we also have Joker, the best pilot in the galaxy, meaning we can drop in right on top of Saren easy peasy. Unfortunately, the door shuts right as our wheels touch dirt, so we've got to find a way to power it back up. We're told there should be some security panels that we can locate to get this opened, and after fighting through the Geth defenses that Saren left for us, we find them. The fight to get here is honestly pretty well done, with tons of cover and decent enemy variety, and there's even this section once you've reached the underground where you can hack Geth armatures to fight for you. It's really cool, probably one of the better fights in the game if I'm being honest. And once you've finished that fight, you get to interact with those security panels to open that door, except nothing happens. Well, something happens, but it's just a badly damaged hologram that's only capable of passing bits and pieces of information along, at least to our companions. We're able to understand it since we've interacted with both the Prothean Beacon and Conduit. The hologram's going on about the impending Reaper invasion, mentioning things like the Archives, the Conduit, even the Citadel for some reason. Weird, right? Either way, we've got power back to the Archive doors, meaning we can follow Saren. So we make our way back to the Mako and begin our journey through the Archives. Upon entering, we're greeted with rows of these massive containers that seem to stretch into infinity, some of them jutting out from the walls to create intrigue. Are these unused, opened, emptied? A secret fourth thing? I'm sure Liara could tell you since she's been geeking out during the entire Mako ride, but for some reason, the companion dialogue here wasn't paced for a player that's actively driving the Mako. Normally, I wouldn't mind having to stop in order to listen to a companion. It's usually a great way to learn more about the world while taking in the scenery. But why would the devs expect me to do that when I've been told that Saren needs to be stopped as soon as possible at any cost? It's such a stark contrast in pacing that creates a very weird friction for the player. Do I keep going, skipping over dialogue that might give me more knowledge about the lore and our reason for being here? Or do I ignore the most dangerous man in the galaxy for a few minutes to learn some fun facts? Why not both, since once you've driven far enough, a giant wall of light blocks you from going anywhere until you get out of the Mako and make your way down this elevator. When you do, you meet another hologram named Vigil, a Prothean VI system that's willing to talk to us since we don't stink of indoctrination like Saren does, which, according to him, means there's still hope to stop the Reapers. I'm just gonna mention this right now because there's really no other way to bring it up. This one conversation drops such a knowledge bomb that I am going to try my best to summarize. So bear with me for a minute and sorry if I miss anything. So, the bomb. The Citadel is actually a gigantic Mass Effect relay that links directly to deep space where the Reapers reside. This may not come as that much of a surprise if you paid attention to Caden's headache that he got when walking by the Mass Effect statue on our first trip to the Citadel. And if you're a bit more on the observant side, there's a very slim chance that you picked up on the map of the Council's chamber being shaped exactly like a Reaper ship. I won't blame you for missing that though. I didn't even realize it until some dude on Reddit made a post about it, so shouts out to that guy. But yeah, this is how the Reapers have been carrying out their galactic resets this whole time. They hang around deep space in power-saving mode, observing various civilizations, and then swing by the Citadel to raise the galaxy when they've reached a certain level of advancement. So why do people keep coming to the Citadel then? You've got to imagine somebody would have figured this out, and you'd be right. Kind of. See, it's hard for these races to know that the Citadel is actually evil because the Keepers are there, ensuring nobody ever learns anything about the Citadel in order to perpetuate the pattern of the Reapers hitting a new high score on Space Invaders every 50,000 years. As to why they do this, couldn't tell ya. Asking Vigil essentially gets us the precursor to this scene from The Flash.
My goals are beyond your understanding.
Which begs the question, how do we stop them? Well, that's what the Protheans were trying to figure out, and to their credit, they had some good ideas. We're not gonna get to talk to any of them though, because those cylindrical containers that we've been seeing all over the place, those are Prothean life support pods, which would get shut off at Vigil's discretion if they were deemed non-essential personnel, preserving the species' top scientists. You're able to feel however you want to about that, but it doesn't change the fact that this happened. The only good thing to come out of it was their scientists learning that there was a way to send a different signal to the Reapers that would stop their invasion. Vigil gives us this code and tells us to get after Saren, as he's using the conduit on this planet to backdoor his way into the Citadel so that he can broadcast his signal to summon Sovereign, who will summon the Reapers. So we need to override his signal by uploading this one into the Citadel's master controls, meaning we should probably get a move on. So we make our way back to the Mako, put the pedal to the metal, and I flipped the fucking Mako? Are you kidding me? I didn't even know that was possible. Technical difficulties aside, we're after Saren, and after fighting through some more Geth, we reach the conduit. This thing looks incredible. Except there's a time limit on reaching the portal, emphasized by our companions telling us that we don't have time to admire the view, to which my response is, if we don't have time to admire the view, then why the fuck is the Mako in park? The devs wanted you to admire this view, but also wanted you to treat this mission with urgency, hence the timer. So why are you telling me to get a move on when you haven't even lifted the lockdown on my movement controls? God, my only complaint about this game is the pacing, but that's only weird in some instances like this one where they want to impose a sense of danger or urgency, but give you an incredibly generous timer to make sure you can't possibly fail. Case in point, there are like 4 Geth Colossi out there that I'm sure they want you to fight given the time limit, but you can just drive past them and get through the portal in sub 30 seconds. It's nowhere near as tense as they'd like it to be, but on the other hand, sending the Mako through a fucking Mass Effect relay is by far the coolest thing the Mako has ever done and ever will do. R.I.P. Mako, you were very much the vehicle we had access to. We're then presented with a cutscene to catch us up on the Citadel invasion, which ends with a backshot of Saren, which culminates with a shot of Saren, where we can see the back of his head is full of cables, signifying the completion of Saren's indoctrination. But then we get a second cutscene where Sovereign arrives at the Citadel, and while they aren't slick with the religious imagery, this shot goes so fucking hard that I'm still here for it. Like, are you seeing this? It's so cool, dude. And once Sovereign makes contact, shit goes sideways in the Citadel. Literally. The elevator we've been riding in to reach the council chamber shuts down, and we've got to get out and make our way up on foot via weird gravity shenanigans. This final level is, to put it bluntly, fucking brilliant. Using Ilos to lure the player into a false sense of security by setting it up as just another story mission with slightly higher stakes, just to crank everything to 11 once you meet Vigil works so well, because once you have that conversation, the spectacle doesn't stop until the end credits roll. Even in the gameplay, the Citadel section sees you running along the walls, blasting through waves on waves of enemies, with a mix of weapons and biotics that feels the closest to future installments, bar none. I think one of my favorite details here is that you can lift enemies out of the temporary gravity field and blast them away, watching them float into the abyss. None of the other missions even come close to letting the power fantasy feel this close to fulfilled, but they shouldn't, should they? This is the final mission, the culmination of everything we've been working towards. It makes sense that this feels like a bit more of a cakewalk, even if the Krogans can still beat the shit out of you. Not to mention, it really helps sell the feeling of heroism. If you were struggling to get through these combat sections in the Citadel, I'd be willing to bet it feels kind of anticlimactic once you reach Saren, because after all that time you've spent trying to make progress, it'd feel like he's already accomplished his goals. But being able to blitz through it creates this sense of arriving just in the nick of time, selling that action movie feel once we roll up to the council chamber, which is somehow still beautiful when it's burning down. That's just good interior design, honestly. We reach Saren as he's tampering with some controls before he notices us and hops on that rip-off Green Goblin glider to try and blow us up. Failing to do so, conversation ensues where we learn that Saren had let Sovereign implant him with Reaper tech in order to strengthen his resolve. Obviously, this is just the indoctrination endgame, and I've gotta say, indoctrinated Saren looks tight as hell. Here's the thing. Indoctrinated Saren is meant to be a pretty big story reveal, but due to this game being made in the early 2000s, they didn't have either the time or the resources to make two separate models for him, meaning that this look right here, cables and all, is what Saren looks like from the moment he shows up on Eden Prime. Meaning that the entire time you're trying to convince the council that he's evil, this motherfucker is standing there, fully indoctrinated, robotics literally coming out of his head, talking about, I'm a fully organic life form, I swear. And this makes the council look even dumber when they believe him. God, I'd call this lazy writing if I didn't have real-life comparisons to draw to. Anyway, Saren gives us one more opportunity to join sides with him, and it's here we're given the option to try and talk him down again. After pointing out that Sovereign is using the implants Saren so willingly accepted to control him, Saren claps back with his belief that the relationship is entirely symbiotic, that he represents the next step in evolution for all organic life forms, a perfect synthesis, if you will. Extremely subtle foreshadowing aside, it seems like some part of Saren is still in there that wants to help us prevent the next Reaper invasion. But Sovereign's control is too strong, so Saren does the only thing he's capable of doing to help us now. He fucking kills himself. Holy shit, it was that easy? The whole time? Whatever, let's go mess with that control panel. And as we do, we're given an option. See, since Sovereign's inside the Citadel, he's trying to summon all of the Reapers while his Geth forces are outside in a dogfight with the Alliance fleet. The Council is part of that fleet and they're in danger, so the option we're given is to either help the Council or tell the fleet to wait for a shot at Sovereign. If we save the Council, we're sacrificing hundreds of civilian lives in order to save 4. It's a classic trolley problem, except as far as I'm concerned, this lever only goes one way since you can always elect a new politician. So we see the Alliance forces setting themselves up for their shots at Sovereign, and when the calls for help come through the Normandy, Joker shuts off the channel. What a power move, dude. During all of this, Shepard sends the companions to double tap Saren and make sure he's dead, which, while cruel, is a bit necessary, especially since as they do, Sovereign intervenes by hijacking Saren's corpse in order to make us fight the guy in the world's worst boss fight. Okay, not the world's worst boss fight, but definitely the game's worst boss fight. It follows the same setup as every other boss fight, where you damage the guy until they start calling in reinforcements that you've got to deal with, while also fighting the boss. The piece that makes the Saren fight so hard is that he moves exactly like a Geth stalker unit, meaning he's jumping from wall to ceiling like I'm fighting fucking Spider-Man. It's so annoying, but if you've got access to any powers that can disrupt his movement, then it's pretty easy to just lift him in the air and fill the fucker with holes. Once you drop the guy to half health, we get a cutscene showing the Alliance beginning their attack on Sovereign, except their attacks aren't doing anything because they can't penetrate the shields, meaning we've really gotta kill Saren to try and help out. So the combat resumes, where we do the exact same thing we'd already been doing, and once we've dropped Saren's health bar to 0, it's finally over. A cutscene plays where Saren's body begins to disintegrate, having severed the signal from Sovereign, fading away into ash like he'd never existed in the first place. Simply a tool to be used and discarded by a hand of God. But due to that signal being severed, Sovereign malfunctions and his shields go down, meaning the Alliance has the chance to go absolutely ballistic on the Reaper, blasting Sovereign to smithereens, almost killing us in the act, but that's fine. Once the ship is destroyed, a rescue team consisting of Anderson and some random-ass security guard is sent into the wreckage of the Citadel to locate Shepard's squadron, where they find Garrison Liara perfectly fine amidst the wreckage. But where's Shepard? And that's when the camera starts panning around crazy style as the music begins to swell, and with a shot of Shepard's feet climbing the wreckage, we emerge triumphant and walk out with Anderson, smiling as the scene fades to black. Then we cut back to fucking Udina. God, I'm tired of this guy. But he's proposing that we rebuild the council with a human chairman this time, which doesn't really seem right to me, but both Anderson and Udina seem to believe that the council won't just accept our leadership, they think they'll welcome it on account of us saving the fucking galaxy. You know, when you put it like that, that's pretty fair. And as a bonus, we get to be the deciding factor in who heads that council. Our choices are Anderson and Udina, but I don't see why this is a choice, since Udina's done nothing but backstab and undermine us the entire game, so congrats on the council seat, Anderson. Shepard obviously handles the decision with more tact, talking about how we're about to go to war with the Reapers and thus Anderson would be best for the job, with Anderson capping it off on a statement about showing the other races what it takes to survive. It's a really good setup for a sequel, which we're getting into in the next video, and the game ends with a shot of Shepard in front of a dope background before cutting to a shot of the Normandy flying away while the credits fade in. God, it's beautiful, and to top it off, the outro music fucking rips. Just listen to it. And that's Mass Effect. It's just such a special game, you know? There's so much love and care put into this one thing that you can't help but appreciate it. I know this is the part where I usually talk about something the game did especially well, but I'm having a hard time pinpointing something for this section because the thing Mass Effect does best is its world building, and I've already talked about all the cool ways they use it during the story recap, I think, so I'm just kinda grasping at straws here. But I don't want to stop talking about it, yet I can't keep talking about it since the other best part of these games is the choices you make and the massive effect they have in the future games. I'm sure you've noticed by now that I prefer to talk about these things chronologically. I know, shocker, the funny clock character has a weird thing about time, how original. But at this point I'm rambling, so I hope you enjoyed the video. I should go.